Well, good afternoon and welcome to another session of Lunch and Learn with our Chief Inspector for the state of Arkansas, the mechanical program, Mr. Tony Woodard, and myself, Tom Hunt, with the Arkansas HVACR Association. But today we're talking about combustion ventilation. And Tony, we've got a lot to talk about here. We start off with talking about the shield that needs to go around your vent pipe as it goes through the ceiling up through the attic.
Yes, sir. And I would say we catch this. This gets missed on change out. The guys on new construction, they're almost 90%. They're putting everything in the attic, so they're already above the horizontal assembly, and they don't really think about this because 90% of their installs are in the attic. But once you build that closet in the bottom and you build a little mechanical room and you're going to put your type B vent, whether it's a water heater, furnace, anything you vent with a type B vent, where insulation is going to be blown to it or around it, it requires a 26 gauge insulation shield. And it's 26 gauge, mind you, not your 30 gauge duct pipe. That is a non-combustible sleeve. Majority of your vents are 4, so you'd be looking at a 6-inch piece of duct pipe, usually 3 to 4 foot long, because it has to go up above the insulation level, down and penetrate right inside of the sheetrock. And then your flue pipe goes through the middle of it.
So it needs to be at least 2 inches larger than the vent pipe itself?
Yes, that's correct. That's the size of it. So if you had a 5, you'd go to a 7 and so forth. That's correct.
And you know what, just as somebody who would be like your typical installer thinking in terms of, well, I'm going to do this. Here I got a piece of 8-inch duct right here. I'm just going to make it work. But that would not, because it wouldn't be heavy enough, would it?
No, it wouldn't be heavy enough if you wanted to go to a 26 gauge. Now, with that said, you can kill 2 birds at one time as a high-low combustion. A gentleman called me the other day. He had stuck a 8-inch, as a 10-inch, 26 gauge high pipe, and he used it as his insulation shield and came down. He had more volume of air around the vent pipe. And then he had another one come low, made that one 26 gauge, and he made the other one of the 30. You can do that, but the trick is the 26 gauge. But you can kill 2 at one that way if you want to do that, increase that size.
Okay. And the height of it, I notice here, needs to be, what, 2 inches above the insulation?
2 inches. Your standard insulation level here in Arkansas is 14 inches. So that's what it's supposed to be. Let me word it like that. That's what we're looking for. So you'd be looking at about 16 inches above the sheetrock level, an inch or 2 down, 18, 20-inch duct pipe. I said 3 foot, a 2-footer would do you.
Yeah, I got you. All right, let's see if we can move on to the next slide. It says appliance and equipment vent terminals shall be located such that doors cannot swing. What are we talking about here?
What we're talking about here is you go to your old standard old 2-story house where you got these ACLOs or storage facilities, I'll call them, that they pile all their Christmas stuff in, and all of a sudden your water heater or your furnace happen to be in there. Door swings catch or hit the vent pipes, and contractors go and get caught in a dilemma. Duct system goes from there to the crawl floor between the first and second. I'm going to have to put a unit in here. I strongly recommend you go to Cat 3 in this situation. With your PVC venter, you can do a lot better configuration, but these doors get into that. And with a Cat 3, you don't have that clearance from the firebox per our fire code and our fuel code and our mechanical code. You can get as close as 3 inches with a lot of the seal combustion Cat 3 units.
Okay, this is interesting.
Yeah, this gets confusing. This is actually from flue collar, your initiation to termination is a minimum of 5 foot. So here again, you'd have an old situation if you had an old dedicated unit laying down. I can give you an example of some Duquesnes that were in Lone Oak, Arkansas, 312 pitch roof. They were butted right up against the rafter. It comes down. So the flue bonnet was right there, a 2-footer, got it up in the 2 to 3 foot, got outside, and it was plenty above the roof height of the pitch. And individuals change these out and leave that old vent. Nope, you're going to have a 5-foot minimum from initiation to termination. So from your draft collar, once you turn either with a 90-degree elbow, you're going to have 5 foot to where it terminates at the bottom of the cap.
Yes, so on those 312, 412 pitches, that you might get into that situation.
You will get into that. That's where you'll run into that. And we've run into this with the old, something come to mind, the dedicated hanging Modine or Suntech, the old unit heaters. minimum 5 foot on this, where here lately we had to get them to correct those.
All right, here we are. We made it out of the attic. We're through the roof. Now we got to know how tall we've got to go.
And we have a nice little chart to help us there. It tells us what our pitch is. I don't know what happened in 2010. I haven't seen a house under a 10, 12 pitch roof. They just waste all that money in the attic. But this little chart will clearly help you know that if you get up to your 12, 14, you're going to be, a lot of them, they get surprised when they see they got to be 5 foot above that roof pitch on some of these high pitch roofs.
So on a 12-12, and there's a lot of 12-12 pitches out there.
There's a lot of 12-12s. You're getting up there. It's hard to get up there to begin with. You're held on by a rope, but you're having to get, and one thing that we're not talking about right quick, I know we're trying to do this in a time frame. What you need to picture now, there is an imaginary 3-inch snow line on the manufacturers. It doesn't matter the pitch of the roof for the state of Arkansas now by ICC. When they go into their Cat 3, where their intake comes up, those have to be 18 inches above that 3-inch snow line. So you're at a minimum of a 21 inch. If you were putting a concentric kit on the bottom side of the intake, that's going to be 21 inches above the roof line, and then your exhaust on up. So those are going to have to start sticking up further above the roof pitches as well.
Okay, combustion air from indoors. You know, I just haven't seen any of this in a long time. Not since you know, you had the really old houses built in the 40s and 50s.
Right. And I had a picture I could have sent you. Over my 36 years, I have looked and looked where I could find a furnace that fully had the volume of air around it that didn't need combustion air. And I took that picture and I meant to send it to you. This lady had a 2-story house and she turned her basement area, her son had turned it into a garage band. They literally really had a 80% furnace. This was a 24 by 24 room. And in the center, leaned up against a support pole, they had put their furnace in there. That room was the only room in my 36 years that I've seen that has a large enough volume that didn't need combustion or figured combustion air. It had enough free area with the 50 cubic feet per 1,000 BTU. It had a 70,000 BTU furnace on it. It needed the 3,500 cubic foot. And it had 6,000. You don't find those too often.
Yeah.
But there's that next slide shows you your math formula, your rule of cubic foot for you to understand what you need. Just to give this some perspective, a standard 2-car garage is 3,200 cubic foot with a 9-foot ceiling. So you take a two-car garage and put a unit in the middle. That's the kind of room we're talking about just for 100,000 BTU furnace. You're not finding a room like that.
Well, I'm just glad we're past that point that we don't even take that into consideration much, because, you know, there's some math involved. It talks about if you've got air changes of, you know, greater than 4 air changes per hour. And, you know, unless you're doing your own blower door test, you got an engineer doing it, you got no way of knowing that. So it's just safer to put the 2 pipes in there or bring in outdoor combustion air.
Or go to a Cat 3 that does it for you. Takes all the math out of your hands.
That's right. Okay, outdoor combustion air says what to outdoors in accordance with each opening shall have a minimum free area of 12 square inches.
Correct. 12 square. That would be, well, so that's kind of tricky in itself as well. I mean, if you're dedicated outside wall, so if we had a certain run that we had to go horizontally to get the outside wall, that 12 inches wouldn't play. This is the minimum requirement we're talking about. If you're just, you can cut your grills in on that outside wall. That's what we're getting in. And then this cross dimension, that's the smallest they'll allow a duct to be. It can be 30 inches wide, but this dimension, it can be less than 3 inches.
All right. Now then, using outdoor combustion air with 2 permanent openings.
This is our standard one that guys use they use their high pipe and their low pipe. One gets to within 12 inches of the roof pit, or the 12 inches of the ceiling. One gets to within 12 inches of the bottom line. You could do a high and low horizontal. Vertical works the best because molecular movement naturally wants to rise. It wants to go vertically instead of horizontally. This one we've run into with engineers in Eureka Springs. I highly recommend that you run across one of these as a contractor, you get in touch with our office. Let us help you with this. This can be tricky. I know the fuel code, it's in there and it allows it, but we want to approve it before we do allow it. And we've taught that to the city inspectors to reach out to us. A lot of this is engineered, designed, because where we ran into Eureka Springs, where we wanted to do it, we had a lot of car exhaust that would stop and park and go in there. You don't want to draw that into the building because they're low. Mm-hmm. So this is something you need to consider. They were meeting the material, the fact that it was high at the ceiling fact, but where it initiated at was at ground level with vehicles. So please get a hold of us if you try one of these one permanent method systems.
You know, that brings up a good issue, and that is if you have a question, the safest thing for a contractor to do is talk to their local inspector and make sure that what they're thinking about does meet the code. You know, the vast majority of everything we do is just repetition, and you do it right once and you know what to do from then on. But if you get into a question, your inspector is your best partner to make sure it's done right. And it's a whole lot cheaper to ask a question and do it right the first time.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Very good. There's some of your pictorial examples.
It's very interesting to me. I guess I hadn't thought a lot about it, about this bottom outlet. You know, I guess I've just always seen both of them come from the top and come down.
Right.
You can bring it from the crawl space as long as that crawl space is vented.
Right. And that's an you know, Hot Springs, Eureka. I don't know what it is about Springstown, but you will find crawl space houses built on the side of mountain in this configuration where you would have a vented attic and a crawl space, and you could achieve it that way.
It's just interesting to me. You know, when you're not accustomed to something, you see something like this, it just makes you stop and think and ask the question, is that okay?
Yeah, it's a one you really want to think about before critters in them. And, you know, you're going to have to grill that and make it a 300-pound floor-plated grill and things like that. So animals and rats and stuff can't get through there. I wouldn't recommend it, but it's legal. Here's
another one that's like we were just talking about, bringing both of them down from the ceiling.
That's our common one. That's the common practice we see today. That's your best method too. I mean, it just naturally, air moves that way. Mm-hmm. It likes it that way.
Very interesting. Where you're going horizontally all the way to the outside, both top and low.
And this is a simple math. This one's actually the simplest way for a contractor to learn. If that vertical pipe he had to use was a 6-inch, he's upsized this one to an 8 because the air, it just doesn't travel that well that way. So you need a larger surface area to do that. That's it.
Yeah.
Well, they need to think about that because you're talking about you got to be high and low. You might not have the circumference to meet the high and low going horizontal there.
Here's with one. You know, I don't guess I've ever seen an application where we did one. I didn't even know until we started preparing for this that you could have one.
You can, but this is the one I strongly recommend you reach out to our department. Give us a call. Let us help you with this because this can get especially with Cat 2, 80% furnaces and a water heater with a draft collar. Mm-hmm. This is where we have some spillage. So you really want us to help you with this to ensure we don't create a spillage situation for that draft collar to backflow and back up into the building.
Well, the reason I found this to be so interesting, I had one of our contractors evidently had read this, but he was turned down by a city inspector, and you know, he was just confused because he was reading this, and basically at that point you have to remember that the local municipality would have final authority on something like that. Isn't that correct?
That is correct. And I want to let these guys know, if you get actually into your commentary, this is strictly added for retrofit. They had to come up. We've got buildings, whether folks know it or not, we have buildings to this day that are just now getting mechanical heating and air ventilation. We still have some old historic buildings that never had it that are getting it. This is a code that was added to ICC. Really, if you read the comment, for retrofit only. This is not for new construction, and it really needs a lot of attention. And I strongly ask you to reach out to us to help you with this.
Well, let's see. One permanent opening. Again, we're talking about the one permanent opening method. It has to be commencing within 12 inches of the top. So,
right, that pictorial you just showed, that would be it. And like I spoke earlier, where we ran into some problems where they were doing it, we were doing it. We had buildings that were basically in the ground, all but the last third part of it, where they were communicating outside, and that's the only place they could get their combustion. But also, it was vehicular traffic coming by there. That's a problem because of the carbon monoxide off the exhaust. So that creates a deal. But that's it. That's the requirements that you must meet if you have a free, not area that can't produce a hazard to bring in that combustion.
So if you have a question or you got a situation like this, you need to purchase the Arkansas Fuel Gas Code, which is, by the way, brand new, isn't it, Tony?
Yes, sir. We're going to it's adopted. We are under the 2018 Fuel Gas Code. They are printed now. You can go to ICC and purchase them. And we're also under the 2018 Plumbing Code, and we will be under the 2021 International Mechanical Code. We're shooting for March 1st.
Here's your picture, Tony.
Yes, sir. This picture, this is what happens to contractors. This young man, he's been educated quite a bit, but this is what part of it was his fault. Part of it wasn't. The install, he had to learn quite a bit what to do, not to do in this situation, but he did do a load. And then during the construction phase, they changed and switched gears on him, and they did bad insulation in the vertical walls. But once he got his equipment installed, then they came back in and they sprayed the deck, and they're going to close that off. And now this is not a venting communicating attic, this venting with outside. So at this point, since he's got category 2, 80%, we're going to have to just defeat the purpose of their foam and install and cut combustion dilution ducts in here. If it's a cat 3, they could have ran their PVC vent up and foamed right around it. It'd been good to go. But we have a 2 thing. We've got our insulation shield we'll have to cut out away from the foam. And also going to have to bring in and derive combustion dilution air for these appliances, because there were 15 of these in this attic.
I have a question that's just out of curiosity. What's this black on this PVC pipe here?
That is the weld pipe. That is where the welder, in fact, I'm glad you pointed that. That's not a legal trap. That's a running trap. Manufacturers on that one want a 3-inch trap. That is not a trap. So, and he got it melted, and he bent his elbow, and he doesn't have the clearance on his evaporator. He panned off way too much. It was a learning process. His platform, you'll notice, is not extending out 30 inches as well. So,
oh my, this probably cost him quite a few dollars to come back and make it right.
It was a 6 weeks process. I went down and made 4 inspections in Nashville on this one. It was a 6-week ordeal for this young. He's still in business. He survived.
Good for him.
And that's he's doing better. He calls me quite often now.
Well, we're running short on time, so I won't take my trip down chase rabbits. But let's go to the next one.
Okay, and there's where they foamed it on him. So he had already had all his equipment and appliances up, and then they come back and foamed that in. Now we had to get combustion dilution air, and they had to sporadically go through, and I helped them out with the math, and we used the volume of what we had, but then we had to install a bunch of 10-inch combustion ducts, and we didn't necessarily do a high and a low because we had so many. They're sporadically paced out, but it's like 12 combustion ducts had to be cut, and it was cut out a massive, basically a foot by foot, big hole, and went through their foam.
That brings up a great point, and that is all of our contractors need to make sure that they understand what are the construction features and make sure that they specify as much as they can those construction features in their contract, because as much money as you would have to spend after somebody as a second thought adds an encapsulated attic, somebody's got to pay that.
Yes.
And that poor contractor, he could lose a lot of money if he hadn't been very specific.
Luckily for this young man, they helped him out. I mean, they kind of met in the middle, and I think it was by the time this is said and done, it's about an $8,000 expense, and I think they met in the middle on it.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, it was expensive. There was a lot of equipment. Okay, this is a picture of one of the combustion air ducts that he brought in, and he came over, and the reason you see the duct coming and going. And I've noticed you'll see that sprinkle system. We also had to get the building sprinkled. There was other issues going on. Me and the state fire marshal were working on this one. But he masticked his combustion duct, and I asked him, he said, "Mr. Woodard, you made me mastic them others. I was masticking it all. I was not gonna." I said, "Hey, that's okay, sir. That's fine." But yeah, so it was a lot of extra labor for nothing. This we added in. This was another thing due to the sanctuary. He wanted to get his commercial fresh air through his return system. He tied it in. He's proud of it, and he showed me his filter. And I said, "Okay, show me how you replace it." That was kind of funny. There's no walkway. There's no standing path. There's nothing. And he was chipping away at that foam to get that filter. Okay, I said, "That's fine. We got to get walkways, platforms, but it's a learning lesson." Okay.
This is our final slide.
This is our final slide. I want to show this. This company is an outstanding company. They've done great work, and they're so used to putting equipment in attic spaces because they're so large, as we discussed. But this happens to be a small volume of an attic, even though it's ventilated. And to your left, the picture's not showing the water heaters, but we have multiple BTUs in here, which adds up well over 300,000. This needed combustion dilution air brought in because it was confined. It didn't meet our rule. The common vent was excellent. It was done right, but this was just one of those where we've done so many and we never run into this. This is something I want guys to pay attention to. Just because it's an attic and it's a ventilated attic, know your cubic foot of volume versus your total BTU up there, because you can still suffocate one if it's too confined.
Well, Tony, I appreciate it very much. I wish we had another 30 minutes to be able to continue with this, because I always learn so much, and I appreciate your time. I appreciate the Department of Labor and Licensing allowing you and all the other guys to work with us, with the association, to help educate our guys, because, our guys are good guys. They want to do it right, but they've got to learn. So this program does a tremendous job of helping to educate. Thank you again, Tony, for your time. And we very much appreciate all the opportunities that we have, and by being able to work with our industry and the HVACR Association and the Arkansas Licensing Board.